Up until the 1950s and 60s, Sydney had quite an extensive tram network. Indeed, at one point the network was the largest in the Southern Hemisphere. But by 1961 the network had all been torn up and mostly replaced with buses, as Sydney and many other cities around the world began focusing their efforts on new car infrastructure instead. That said, in recent years, Sydney has started to undo some of these fairly short-sighted decisions, and has been working to build up its tram network once again. In fact, it won't be long until Sydney welcomes its fourth new tram line, as part of the Parramatta Light Rail project. This new line, which will be given the very practical name of the L4 Westmead and Carlingford line, is going to be a bit different to Sydney's other light rail lines, and is going to be the topic of today's video. Hey all, I'm City Moose and I do videos about public transport and urbanism in Australian cities and potentially around the globe, so subscribe if that's the kind of content that interests you. I also have a Ko-fi if you want to support me in making these videos, it is always appreciated. But now, back to the light rail. Sydney has 3 existing light rail lines, and all 3 of them are based on letting people make trips from Sydney's inner suburbs into its central business district or CBD. Sydney's first modern light rail line, the L1, connects the inner west with Central Station on the CBD's southern edge, while the more recent L2 and L3 lines run through the CBD and out to Sydney's southeastern suburbs. The upcoming L4 tram line, on the other hand, isn't being built anywhere near the Sydney CBD, or at least nowhere near Sydney's main CBD. Instead, it's being built around Parramatta. Parramatta is about 20 kilometres to the west of the main CBD, and has been dubbed Sydney's second CBD as part of the New South Wales government's efforts to decentralise Sydney. These efforts are part of Sydney's Metropolis of 3 Cities plan, which provides important context to understanding why the upcoming Parramatta Light Rail is being built. Under this plan, the aim is to change Sydney from being centred around the current CBD in the east to a city with multiple major business precincts. The 3 main ones being that existing eastern CBD, a new CBD in the far west to be built around the upcoming Western Sydney Airport, and one in the middle at Parramatta. Parramatta was actually the second city founded by Europeans in the entire country, making it a natural choice for a new CBD. Of course, over time as Sydney grew, it swallowed it up. But now Sydney has sprawled so far westwards that Parramatta is basically the geographic centre of the city. This westward sprawl has also meant a lot of people are now living quite far away from the main Sydney CBD, with commute times from many outer western suburbs reaching well over an hour. And these super long commutes are becoming a problem. The solution is unfortunately not as simple as just people working in the main CBD moving to suburbs closer to it, because the further east you move, the higher property prices tend to get, and many people are now priced out of Sydney's inner suburbs. So, for commuters, the new CBD in Parramatta will be much closer to Sydney's relatively more affordable western suburbs, and for businesses, commercial rents in the Parramatta CBD should also be a bit more economical. On top of that, the existing main Sydney CBD has become very congested. The roads and public transport services leading to it are becoming very full, and while there are projects like the Sydney Metro which should help ease some of this overcrowding, spreading out the load by getting people to travel to different CBDs instead should also help make a big difference. So there are some very real benefits to building up Parramatta as Sydney's second CBD. But how are the powers that be going to make this happen? Well, the area has been a major employment precinct for some time, being home to the very large Westmead Hospital, as well as Westfield Parramatta Shopping Centre, the biggest shopping centre in the state. And to further boost Parramatta's prominence as a business precinct, various government agencies, such as the New South Wales Police Force, have had their headquarters or key offices relocated into the area. But one of the things a prospective CBD needs to be successful is good transport links. And at the moment, Parramatta's transport links are pretty solid. It has a train station that also acts as a hub for buses, which is served by 4 different train lines, those being the T1 Western, T2 Inner West and T5 Cumberland lines, as well as the Intercity Blue Mountains line. It even has a stop on Sydney's ferry network, although one that does often have to close when tides get too low. However, to support the growing CBD, more transport links are being added. Firstly, there's the upcoming Sydney Metro West, a new underground metro line that will link the Sydney CBD with Parramatta and Westmead. I have a separate video where I discuss this new metro line in more depth. If you're interested, I'll put a link somewhere on screen. Along with the existing train station, this new metro will be useful for people making longer journeys into and out of Parramatta. For people wanting to make shorter journeys around Parramatta and its nearby suburbs, however, they will have the upcoming Parramatta Light Rail. The light rail is mostly going to be running on the street, and will have stops placed pretty close together, meaning it's not going to be a particularly fast way of getting around like the metro will be, but does mean it will be useful for short trips in the local area. The new 12-kilometre line is going to start at Westmead train station, where it will provide an interchange with the T1 and T5 lines. From here, it's going to head north through the Westmead Healthcare Precinct for a stop at Westmead Hospital and the Children's Hospital, before crossing the Parramatta River for stops at Ngara and Bernard Oval. After this, the line turns southward for stops at Fennell Street and Prince Alfred Square, which are in the growing North Parramatta precinct and are close to CommBank Stadium, which is a popular sporting and events venue. The line will then cross the river again using the historic Lennox Bridge to enter central Parramatta and run along Church Street, a popular dining and entertainment precinct that's being pedestrianised as part of the light rail's construction. The next stop is then in the heart of the Parramatta CBD, at Parramatta Square, a new public space and where passengers will be able to interchange with the existing Parramatta train station as well as the upcoming metro station. From here, the line heads eastwards to new stops at Robin Thomas, named after a nearby park, and Tramway Avenue, named after a street that was incidentally named after Parramatta's original tram network. But after that, the line heads onto what used to be the T6 Carlingford line, formerly part of Sydney's heavy rail network. The Carlingford line was a pretty underused line that ran a sort of shuttle service from Clyde Station to Carlingford via intermediate stations at Rosehill, Camellia, Rydalmere, Dundas and Telopea, where passengers would need to transfer at Clyde if they wanted to continue into the city. The line and its stations were closed in 2020 to be converted into light rail, with the exception of Rosehill Station that will no longer exist. Instead, the light rail will join up with this part of the line at a new stop, roughly where Camellia Station was. This stop is being called Rosehill Gardens, and will provide access to the nearby Rosehill Racecourse. The line then continues up to Yarramundi, roughly where Rydalmere Station used to be, and where it provides a connection to the nearby Western Sydney University campus, before finally heading up to stops at Dundas, Telopea and Carlingford, where the line will terminate, and which brings us to the full extent of the first phase of the line. It is worth noting that the line wasn't always going to look like this, and there were some radically different route options thrown about while the line was in planning, including some that I think might have ultimately been better choices than the one currently being built. I'm not going to go into too much detail about these alternative routes in this video, but the channel Building Beautifully did a pretty interesting video on the topic that I'd suggest you check out if you want to know more about them. But with that said, the route that did end up getting built does seem to have one big missed opportunity, that being a connection from its eastern end at Carlingford to the existing Epping train station. Epping Station is just 3.5 kilometres away from the light rail terminus at Carlingford, and is a key interchange station on Sydney's train network, being served by the T9 Northern Line, the M1 Northwest Metro Line, and the Intercity Central Coast and Newcastle Line. So connecting it up with the light rail could have given all the commuters on these lines a new easy way to access the Parramatta CBD. This is particularly true for metro passengers who currently need to change at Epping for a train down to Strathfield, and then again for a train west to Parramatta. Now, to be fair, building this extension from Carlingford to Epping wouldn't be super easy. The old T6 line terminated at Carlingford, so there's no more right of way to convert to light rail beyond that point, meaning the line would likely need to run on the street to get to Epping, and the roads it would need to run down are already full of traffic and fairly narrow, so it would be quite challenging to fit the light rail down them as well. That said, I do hope this connection is considered in the future, as it could help make the new line that much more useful. Speaking of the future though, there is a second phase planned for the Parramatta Light Rail that would add a new branch running to Olympic Park. I'll likely do a full video on this stage sometime in the not so distant future, so subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss it. The future of the second stage was up in the air for a bit, with rumours about it potentially being cancelled. But thankfully, both the federal and state governments do seem to have now committed to this next stage of the project. The actual trams used on the Parramatta Light Rail will be from the CAF Urbos family, which is the same family of trams used on the L1 line as well as the tram lines in Newcastle and Canberra. Although the ones used for the Parramatta Light Rail will have the ability to run on battery power so that some sections of the line won't need overhead wires. Now, personally, I'm not really sure where I stand on battery-powered trams like these. A lot of people, the government included, will talk about the aesthetic benefits of not needing the overhead wires, although those wires have never particularly bothered me. Bourke Street Mall in Melbourne has them, and it has some of the most valuable commercial real estate in the world, so clearly it doesn't bother a lot of other people either. The battery-powered trams also come with slight cost savings when it comes to building the infrastructure, as you don't need to spend money putting up overhead wires, although you do now need to buy more complex trams. But with that said, I'd like to hear all your thoughts on the choice to go with battery-powered trams. Do you think they're worth it over the classic overhead wire-powered ones? Drop a comment below with your thoughts. Now, work on the Parramatta Light Rail is pretty progressed, with construction complete and the trams just needing to complete testing before it's opened. Which leads to the question of whether this line will actually be a meaningful addition to Sydney's transport network. Well, Sydney does seem to be doing pretty well with its other new light rail lines, with the recently opened L2 and L3 lines performing well, and the patronage growth on the L1 line exceeding expectations. Additionally, with an expected frequency of trams every 7.5 minutes, the new line will be providing a frequent turn-up-and-go service. There is also a strong precedent of using light rail to improve connectivity in the secondary CBDs of large cities. In London, trams have been used to build a local transport network around the major hub of Croydon in the city's south. That network was such a success that on opening, passenger numbers were close to 50% higher than expected. Similar light rail systems have also been a success in places like Paris and Jersey City near New York, which does make things look promising for Parramatta. Overall, I think this line will go a long way to improving the local connectivity of Parramatta and its surrounding suburbs, though it could go an even further way if that connection to Epping was built. The new line will also demonstrate to businesses that the government is serious about turning Parramatta into a major hub, and should encourage more development in the area. On top of that, it's good to see Sydney not only focusing on building rail transport to and from the main CBD, and starting to invest in routes that can accommodate more diverse trip types. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. I also want to give a shout out to the channel Sydney Trains Vlogs, where I got some of the background content for this video. And, as always, I'm City Moose, thanks for watching.